First contact gone wrong. The Celestial Alliance scout vessel Luminous Harmony glided through the void, its crystalline hull refracting starlight in mesmerizing patterns. Commander Zelthorn stood on the bridge, six eyes blinking in sequence as he studied the approaching ship. The vessel was boxy and inelegant, thermal radiators jutting out like broken wings, its hull pockmarked with what appeared to be primitive armor plating. Curious design, his sensor officer Vexmore noted, mandibles clicking with amusement. Readings indicate chemical propulsion, nuclear power generation, and no quantum shielding. Primitive, even by emerging civilization standards. Are we certain this is a spacefaring species? Zelthorn asked, outer eyes narrowing in skepticism. Affirmative, Commander. The vessel originated from the third planet of the nearby yellow star. Our preliminary scans of their home system show rudimentary orbital structures and several similar vessels. Zelthorn's kitten plates shifted in what his species considered a smile. The Celestial Alliance had encountered many emerging civilizations in their 10,000 years of interstellar exploration. Each followed a predictable technological path. Chemical rockets giving way to fusion drives, followed by quantum propulsion and eventually dimensional folding. This species was clearly in the earliest stages. Standard protocol for primitive contact, he ordered. Demonstrate our technological superiority to establish proper hierarchy. Target their propulsion systems with a low-yield pulse. The Luminous Harmony's quantum cannons hummed to life, targeting systems locking onto the human vessel's engines with trivial ease. The first shot was designed to disable rather than destroy, a courtesy extended to all primitive species during first contact. The flash of energy struck the human ship, creating a ripple of destruction across its rear section. But what happened next would forever change the Alliance's understanding of the cosmos. A calm, almost resigned voice came through the communication array. Alliance vessel, this is Captain Maya Chen of the Earth merchant vessel Horizon Dawn. We are an unarmed transport carrying agricultural equipment and medical supplies. You have fired upon us without provocation or warning. There was a pause then. You've just killed civilians. The bridge crew of the Luminous Harmony chittered in amusement at what they perceived as hollow bravado. Their second shot was already charging. One last thing, Captain Chen's voice continued, eerily composed. Remember the name Terra. The human vessel's reactor core initiated an emergency protocol. As systems failed catastrophically around her, Captain Chen activated a specialized transmission buoy that ejected from the dying ship. The buoy contained detailed scans of the Alliance vessel, weapons signatures, shield frequencies, hull composition, and tactical capabilities. But most importantly, it contained 3 words that would set the galaxy ablaze. They shot first. Commander Zelthorn watched with mild surprise as the human vessel's reactor went critical, the explosion larger than expected for such a primitive ship. The radiation surge temporarily overwhelmed their sensors. When the displays cleared, nothing remained of the transport vessel except scattered debris. Log it as standard primitive species encounter, he ordered, settling back into his command chair. Note their hostile response to first contact and self-destructive tendencies, clearly not ready for interaction with advanced civilizations. Sir, his sensor officer interrupted, all 4 appendages moving rapidly across the control interface. The vessel's final transmission. The encryption is unlike anything I've seen. It adapted to our attempts to block it in real time. Irrelevant. Zelthorn dismissed. What can a species that still relies on nuclear fission and chemical propulsion do with the information? Their weapons are centuries behind ours. Their drives are primitive. Their ships are built like cargo containers. He composed his report to Alliance High Command. Primitive species encountered. Vessel destroyed due to aggressive response. Sector marked for standard expansion protocol. He had no way of knowing that the next human vessel he would encounter would be very different. In a heavily shielded command center beneath the lunar surface, the Horizon Dawn's final transmission was being analyzed. The room was filled with dozens of displays, each showing a different aspect of the Alliance vessel's capabilities. Military officers, engineers, and scientists worked in grim silence. Admiral Helena Ortega stood at the center, her expression unreadable as she studied the tactical data. They targeted the engines first, she noted. Standard procedure for them. Disable the primitive vessel's propulsion to prevent accidents. Her hand clenched into a fist. They didn't even consider us worth a warning shot. Admiral, a young analyst spoke up. Their energy weapon signatures, shield frequencies, hull composition. We can work with this. The Invictus project can be adapted. Do it, Ortega ordered. Contact Captain Reyes. Tell him the simulations are over. His ship has a real target now. She turned to face the room. The Alliance thinks they encountered a primitive species today. They think we're centuries behind them because we still use nuclear propulsion and kinetic weapons. A cold smile crossed her face. Let's show them why humanity never abandoned the old ways. In the outer reaches of the Sol system, hidden in a classified shipyard between Neptune and the Kuiper Belt, the HSV Invictus waited. Its crew had trained for this moment for years, hoping it would never come. Now, as the order to deploy reached them, they moved with the precision of a team that had practiced for doomsday. Captain Miguel Reyes stood on the command deck, watching the final preparations. Most captains would admire their ship's sleek lines or elegant design. The Invictus had neither. Its hull was a study in brutalist architecture taken to space. Layers upon layers of specialized armor, point defense turrets clustered like thorns, and radiator panels that resembled the scales of some ancient armored beast rather than components of a spaceship. Final systems check complete, Captain. Commander Sophia Lynn reported. All redundancies are green. All backup systems for the backup systems are green. Reyes nodded, a grim smile playing across his face. How many times did engineering complain about the excessive redundancy during construction? Lost count after the first 100, sir. Though Chief Rodriguez admitted she was wrong after the last simulation, she finally understood why we needed 3 separate reactor cores, each capable of powering the entire ship. The Invictus was humanity's answer to a question they'd been asking themselves since they first looked to the stars. What if we're not alone, and what if they're not friendly? While public space programs focused on exploration vessels and scientific outposts, a secret coalition of Earth's powers had pooled resources into creating something else entirely. A warship built not around theoretical technologies that might work, but proven systems that definitely would. Walk with me, Commander, Reyes ordered, heading toward the central corridor. The ship's interior was just as utilitarian as its exterior. Every corridor was wide enough for damage control teams to pass each other while carrying repair equipment. Every junction had sealed bulkheads that could compartmentalize sections in case of breach. Even the lighting was designed with combat in mind. Red strips along the floor would guide crew members if the main systems failed. They passed the weapons control center, where crews were running final checks on systems that had made their designers lose sleep. The kinetic launch tubes weren't elegant. They were essentially massive railguns designed to accelerate tungsten rods to appreciable fractions of light speed. The missile bays weren't filled with sophisticated guided weapons, but with thousands of simple fusion devices that could overwhelm any point defense through sheer numbers. Engineering says the modified Orion drive is ready for full power testing. Lynn reported as they entered the engine section, though they're still calling it controlled insanity rather than propulsion. Reyes laughed. The Orion drive was perhaps the most human part of the whole ship, taking the destructive power of nuclear weapons and turning it into a means of propulsion. While theoretical physics suggested elegant quantum drives, humanity had looked at their stockpile of nuclear weapons and thought, we could use this to reach the stars. The engine room itself was a testament to human paranoia. 3 completely independent reactor cores, each housed in its own armored chamber. The main Orion drive system, capable of using nuclear pulses for both propulsion and, if necessary, as impromptu weapons, and enough backup chemical thrusters to maneuver even if everything else failed. Latest intel from Lunar Command. Lin handed him a tablet. The Alliance has established outposts in 3 systems since the Horizon Dawn incident. They're not even trying to hide their expansion. Reyes studied the tactical overlay. They think we're primitive. That we'll either hide or try to fight them with the same kind of ships they destroyed. He handed the tablet back. They don't understand what they've awakened. The Invictus wasn't just a warship. It was humanity's contingency plan given form. Every nightmare scenario, every worst-case analysis, every paranoid what-if had been built into its design. The result wasn't pretty, wasn't elegant, and would probably horrify more advanced species with its brute force approach to space combat. All hands, Rice's voice echoed through the ship's comm system. This is the captain. You all know why we're here. You all know what happened to the Horizon Dawn. He paused, looking around at his crew, men and women who had trained for years in secret, hoping their skills would never be needed. The Alliance thinks they've encountered a primitive species that poses no threat. They think our technology is centuries behind theirs because we still use nuclear power and kinetic weapons. They're about to learn why humanity never abandoned the old ways, why we built this ship not to look impressive, but to survive anything they can throw at us and keep fighting. The main reactor hummed to life, its deep thrum resonating through the hull. Around the ship, weapon systems powered up. Point defense turrets rotated through their test cycles, and armor plates shifted to their combat configurations. Helm, set course for the Alliance border fleet's last known position. Reyes ordered. Let's show them what happens when you corner a species that spent its entire history preparing for the worst. The HSV Invictus moved out of its hidden dock, its massive form emerging from the darkness. It wasn't humanity's first starship, nor was it their most advanced, but it was something the Alliance couldn't possibly understand. A warship built by a species that had spent centuries figuring out how to kill each other and had turned all that knowledge toward defending themselves among the stars. The hunt was about to begin. The reckoning. High Commander Zelthorn of the Celestial Alliance Border Fleet observed the approaching human vessel with all 6 of his eyes, each one registering a different level of amusement. The ship was, by any civilized standard, an insult to space travel, a brutish collection of armor plates and primitive weaponry that looked more like a mobile fortress than a proper warship. They sent one ship, his tactical officer noted, mandibles clicking in barely contained laughter. One, and it appears to be powered by nuclear detonations. These humans are even more primitive than we thought. Still using chemical weapons and kinetic projectiles, Zelthorn chittered. Prepare the quantum lance arrays. Let's show them what real technology looks like. Aboard the HSV Invictus, Captain Reyes watched the Alliance fleet's energy signatures spike. They're powering up their main weapons, Lieutenant Park reported from Tactical. Multiple quantum lance arrays charging. Their targeting systems are, wait, they're not even trying to mask their signatures. Why would they? Reyes smiled coldly. They think we're primitives who can barely achieve spaceflight. Status of the kinetic launch tubes. All tubes loaded and charged, Captain. Tungsten rods are at optimal temperature. Mass drivers are spun up to full power. The Alliance fleet's first salvo was beautiful to behold, streams of coherent energy that could slice through any known energy shield, accompanied by quantum torpedoes that could theoretically phase through solid matter. It was the pinnacle of their civilization's military technology. It splashed harmlessly off the Invictus's hull. Impact report. Reyes demanded, though he already knew the answer. Ablative armor performing exactly as designed, Captain. Commander Lin reported with satisfaction. Their energy weapons are dissipating across the outer layers. The quantum torpedoes are having trouble phasing through 30 meters of layered tungsten ceramic composite. On his command throne, Zelthorn's amusement turned to confusion. Impossible. Their armor. It's absorbing our weapons fire, but it's just physical material. There's no energy shielding, no quantum field manipulation. Sir, His tactical officer's voice had lost all trace of humor. They're launching something. Multiple projectiles accelerating too. That can't be right. The velocity readings must be wrong. They weren't wrong. The Invictus's first salvo demonstrated why humanity had never abandoned kinetic weapons. 6 tungsten rods, each weighing several tons, accelerated to 30% of light speed, impacted the Alliance fleet's lead ships. Their energy shields, designed to deflect and absorb energy weapons, might as well have been tissue paper against the raw kinetic force. Direct hits on their frontline vessels, Park reported. Their shields, they didn't even attempt to stop the projectiles. They're designed for energy weapons, not kinetic impacts. The Alliance fleet formation dissolved into chaos. Their tactical doctrine had no protocols for this kind of attack. Energy weapons could be absorbed or deflected. Quantum torpedoes could be jammed or diverted. But there was no elegant defense against what was effectively being hit by small moons moving at relativistic speeds. Their point defense systems are activating, Lin noted. They're trying to shoot down our next salvo, but they're scanning for energy signatures because that's what civilized weapons have. Launch the missile swarm, Rais ordered. Let's see how they handle old-fashioned chemical propulsion and fusion warheads. The Invictus's missile bays opened, disgorging thousands of relatively simple missiles. No quantum guidance systems, no sophisticated AI, just solid fuel rockets carrying fusion warheads, accelerating on ballistic trajectories that the Alliance targeting computers dismissed as too primitive to be threats. That was their second mistake. The missile swarm overwhelmed their point defense grid through sheer numbers. For every missile their energy weapons destroyed, 10 more continued on their way. The Alliance fleet, with all its advanced technology, had no defense against weapons their civilization had abandoned millennia ago. Enemy fleet is in disarray, Park reported. 3 ships destroyed, 2 heavily damaged. Their formation is breaking up. Rais nodded grimly. Send them a message on all frequencies. This is Captain Rais of the HSV Invictus. You killed civilians. We killed warships. Consider carefully what happens next. The remaining Alliance ships began to retreat, their quantum drives spooling up for faster-than-light travel. On their bridges, crews who had never known defeat tried to understand how they had been outmatched by technology they considered obsolete. Shall we pursue? Lin asked. Rais shook his head. No need. They'll report what happened here. Let them tell their superiors how their advanced energy weapons were useless against simple armor, how their sophisticated shields couldn't stop tungsten rods moving at relativistic speeds, how their entire tactical doctrine was undermined by weapons they considered too primitive to be worth defending against. The Invictus held position, its brutal form a stark contrast to the elegant Alliance ships limping away. It had been built not to win battles through superior technology, but to survive them through overwhelming force and redundancy. Send a message to Lunar Command, Rais ordered. First engagement successful. Enemy fleet retreating. They've learned their first lesson about humanity. We don't fight fair. We fight to win. The Imperial Military Analysis Center on the Alliance homeworld was in chaos. Dozens of analysts crowded around holographic displays, showing the battle footage from the border fleet encounter, their mandibles clicking in agitation as they tried to make sense of what they were seeing. Senior analyst Kesber manipulated the projection, focusing on the human vessel's weapon systems. Run the simulation again, she ordered, all 4 arms moving across the control interface. There has to be something we're missing. The center's primary tactical AI, said to be the most sophisticated battle computer in known space, attempted to analyze the human ship's combat doctrine for the 47th time. Once again, it crashed. This makes no sense, her junior analyst Turmol muttered. Their technology is centuries behind ours. They're using nuclear propulsion, kinetic weapons, and physical armor. There's no quantum manipulation, no energy field generation. He paused as the implications finally hit him. They're not fighting the way we expect because they never developed the way we expected. Kesver's outer eyes narrowed while her inner ones widened, a sign of deep thought among her species. Show me their armor composition again. The hologram shifted, displaying layer upon layer of materials. Tungsten ceramic composites, heat-dissipating layers, radiation shielding, and more, all arranged in a pattern that seemed almost organic in its complexity. Look at this, she pointed with her upper right hand. The layers aren't just stacked. They're arranged to work together. When our quantum lances hit here, the energy doesn't just get absorbed. It gets redirected through these channels, dispersed across the entire hull. It's not elegant, but it works. Turmoil finished. They're not trying to stop our weapons with superior technology. They're just using brute force and redundancy. Across the room, another analyst was studying the human missiles. These warheads, she called out. They're fusion devices, but the design. It's like they took weapons of mass destruction and miniaturized them. Who looks at planet-killing weapons and thinks, yes, let's make smaller versions for ship-to-ship combat? Humans do, Kesver answered, her voice carrying a new note of concern. Access historical records of their world. All of them. The holographic displays filled with data about Earth, atmospheric composition, gravity, radiation levels, and most importantly, historical records of human warfare. By the celestial light, Turmoil whispered. Their entire history. They spent millennia fighting each other. Every major technological advancement they made was driven by warfare. Even their space program began as a military competition. And look at their home world, Kesver added. The gravity is 1.8 times our standard. The atmospheric pressure would crush most species. The background radiation levels alone would be considered dangerous on any civilized world. She manipulated the display, bringing up more data. They don't just survive there, they thrive. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Alliance had encountered many species over its long history, but none quite like this. Run a comparison, Kesver ordered. Show me how their ship design philosophy compares to ours. 2 images appeared side by side. A typical Alliance warship, sleek, efficient, powered by clean quantum drives, and armed with sophisticated energy weapons. Next to it, the HSV Invictus, brutal, over-engineered, built like a mobile fortress, and armed with weapons that most species had abandoned as too crude. We build our ships to be perfect, Turmoil observed. They build theirs to survive anything. The center's tactical AI attempted another analysis, this time factoring in human historical data. It crashed again, but not before displaying a single conclusion. Warning. Species demonstrates high adaptation to hostile conditions. Look at these design documents we recovered. Another analyst called out. They're engineers. They designed every system assuming it would fail. Then they added backups. Then they added backups for the backups. It's not just redundancy. It's paranoia given physical form. Kesver's mandibles clicked in a pattern that signified deep concern. Not paranoia. Experience. She brought up the specifications of their quantum lance weapons. We designed these to be the perfect ship-to-ship weapons. Clean, efficient, capable of bypassing any energy shield. But they never developed energy shields because they never developed energy weapons. They stuck with physical armor because that's what worked against their own weapons. And now, Turmoil concluded, our perfect weapons are useless against their imperfect defenses. The analysis center's main screen filled with a new tactical assessment. Human military situation. Conventional analysis, impossible. Species operates outside standard combat parameters. They're not insane, Kesver announced to the room. They're survivors. They evolved on a death world, spent their history fighting themselves, and never forgot a single lesson they learned. She looked up at the image of the human warship, its brutal form a stark contrast to the elegant lines of Alliance vessels. We've made a terrible mistake, she whispered. We assume that technological progression follows a universal path, that all species eventually abandon physical weapons for energy-based ones, physical armor for shields. But they never did, because in their environment, the old ways never stopped working. What do we do? Turmel asked. Kesver's eyes all focused on a single point, a rare expression among her kind, one reserved for moments of absolute clarity. We negotiate, she said, and we pray to the celestial light that they're willing to listen. Because if they're not, she didn't need to finish the thought. The room full of the Alliance's brightest tactical minds had already reached the same conclusion. If humanity decided that the Alliance represented an existential threat, there was no telling what other primitive but devastating technologies they might deploy. Sometimes, the oldest weapons were the most dangerous, not because they were the most advanced, but because civilized species had forgotten how to defend against them. As the analysts prepared their report for the Alliance High Command, a single human phrase kept appearing in their simulations, one that their translation software struggled to properly convey, but whose meaning was becoming increasingly clear. Don't start what you can't finish.